uh, those, those of you that are returning, welcome back. For those of you that are new, welcome. And what we're going to do today is the last of the 4-part series of acrylic painting demonstrations. And this one is actually a 2-parter. It's kind of weird. It's the last one, but it also leads into what we're going to do next week when we begin oil painting. Today I'm going to do what's called the underpainting of a painting by an artist named George Inness, who was active during the late 1800s out of New Jersey. He was sort of part of the Hudson, broadly speaking, part of the Hudson River School. Wonderful painter, but a really good painter for the kind of thing that I want to show you tonight. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this. Let me give you a quick view of the painting that we're actually going to work from. This is Brook at Sunset is the name of the title. I believe it's about 1880, somewhere in there, maybe 1890. I can't remember the exact date. But it is, if any of you are from New Jersey and you go to, I think there's a museum at one of the colleges there, and I forget the name of the college, but they've got a lot of George Inness pieces, so you can go sneak into the gallery when you have some time. So this is the painting that we're going to work from. I will have that up on the screen for you to see as I'm working. If you want to work along, by all means, please do. I'm going to go over the supplies in a second here, but this is sort of designed for you to work along if you want to, or if you just want to watch it and ask questions, and then maybe go back to the YouTube channel, Michael's Stores on YouTube. This will be posted probably the next hour or two after the class is done, certainly by the end of the day. And then you can sort of watch the YouTube portion and then maybe do your painting off of that. So it's really up to you. It's designed to be flexible. It's designed to be fun for you. So take advantage of whatever route you want to take. Okay, so let's go over the supplies here really quick. And I do this every week. This is a little bit modified from previous weeks in that I have scaled it down. I'm not going to be using the primary colors today. I'm just going to be using black, white, yellow ochre, raw umber. And those are, it's called working with a limited palette. We're going to only work with those 4 colors. And we're only going to be concentrating on values today. Next week with the oil paintings, with the oil painting segment starting, I'll start to layer the color, the actual primary colors, over top of the underpainting that we're going to do today. So that's sort of the 2-part thing. So be thinking in terms of black and white when you're looking at your George Inness painting and you're working along here. This is a really colorful painting. I deliberately chose it because it has a lot of really kind of bright colors in it, but it also has a lot of really good tones or values, darks and lights. It's got a really strong sense of light to it. It's also got some really strong shadows. So it's a great painting for this kind of approach that we're going to take. So that's what we're going to do today. You'll also want to have some water, and you will need a little palette, and I'll show you this setup here in a minute. The other thing that you'll probably want to get is paper towels, and that's the thing, and I forgot, so I have to run right over there and get it. But just a roll of paper towels, or even a cotton rag, like an old t-shirt, those work great. So this is going to be the setup here. So we're right here. Got all our paints over here. I've got some brushes and stuff over here. The picture's right up here in the corner. And I'm going to go run and get my paper towels. I used to do these kind of classes for a college, and I always forgot my paper towels, like 75% of the time. So, but this is the first time I've done it here, so I'm 3 for 4, so I'm reversing the trend. So
we do have a few questions before we get really started.
Materials questions, go for it, or
Yes.
general questions.
So Pat wants to know, does it matter if they're painting on a good mixed media paper?
With acrylics, as long as it can take some water, it's fine. I've seen those sort of blue, I think they're Strathmore or whatever, multimedia pads, which are a little bit thicker than a sketch pad. That'll work well. What I'm working on is canvas, like a canvas pad. And this is a little bit, this is, I think, 9 by 12. So something in this range, size-wise, will be fine. If you do not have some canvas, acrylic is pretty flexible. If you've got an old piece of like plywood or something, that works well. Paper works well. If you are using paper, just make sure it's a little bit heavier than your sort of standard issue sketch paper. It's, yeah, color. I see a color mixing chart there, something like that. Yeah, so just something a little heavier than your standard paper will be good.
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 And so size, does it matter if it's large or small?
9 by 12 is probably as small as you would want to go. I'm doing it because it fits perfectly on my little screen here. But if you want to work bigger, by all means, do it. It's definitely something that will make things probably a little bit easier in the long run. All right, great. Okay, I think we are ready. I want to start off with kind of a little hot tip of the day, insider tricks here. Last week, if you were here last week, you can raise your hand if you were here. The paint that I used, as you know, it will dry pretty quickly. Acrylics dries quickly. I've saved this from last week and it's still very usable. And the trick that I did is I just put a little bit of saran wrap over the top of it. And then I just took the rag that I was using from last week, balled it up, put a little water on it, and then put that in there. And that just kept everything damp so that the paint was able to survive the week. Normally, if I'd have just left it open like this, these would be solid little chips of paint that I could throw across the room as a Frisbee, be completely useless for what we're doing today. But me being frugal and raised by Depression era parents, or at least their parents were Depression era, I'm always looking for ways to save money and materials. So this is a good little thing you can do. You can also take a little piece of sponge and just sort of cut it into a nice little shape, soak it with water, and just kind of put it right in the middle there and then wrap it up, and it'll be good for at least a week. I mean, this is still, I'm going to use it. So it's still good from last week. I'm not going to use these primaries here, but I am going to use most everything else. Okay, so that's a good way to start off. And as far as what I'm going to use for a brush, I'm a big advocate of using as big a brush as you can get away with. So this is a nice, this is a number 10 out of the Artist Loft, you know, this big satchel of brushes here, this one here. And I've just basically taken, there's a spider on there. This is the biggest round brush that I can use. So I'm kind of thinking along the lines of, I can draw with this in that it's got a nice sharp point, but it's also big enough where I can get a good amount of coverage. So that's my thought on it. I probably wouldn't use a flat brush like this, simply because they don't have quite as versatile a mark making potential as these do. If you press down on these basically become a flat brush. But they also have the potential for a lot of detail. So that's where I'm going to start with. My other little set of brushes here, which would work also equally well, is the bristle brushes. These are more synthetic sables, the ones that I just showed you. And then these are bristle brushes made from kind of rougher fibers, usually from hog bristles or hair from horses. These would be made from, you know, softer material, and they're much finer. So I'm going to use this, but either one will work. And then I'm going to have obviously a ton at my disposal if I need to switch sizes. Okay, so let's get this out of the way and ready, set, go. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to work really lightly and loosely. Oh, actually, one thing I wanted to show you before, I wanted to show you this. So we have the painting that we're working from. And what I've done is I've kind of gridded it off here. So what that does is it lets me see kind of where important features are. And I've divided this into equal thirds, both horizontally and vertically. You'll notice that running along the bottom horizontal line, that's more or less the horizon line. And then the top of the tree tops out more or less at that top horizontal line. The tree is sandwiched in between those middle two. So there's lots of little simple little junctions that I can use to kind of keep your sense of scale set up, to get, you know, basic compositional elements established. So when you're working from this, I've got can you see the grid here? Yeah, I can see it. So this little grid I've kind of transposed from my original grid there, just to give me an idea. I've looked at this painting enough, I kind of know where things go. But if you get a copy of that painting, if you want to work on this later, and you grid it off like on the hard copy or on your screen like I did, and then have an iPad or something sitting there, you can kind of get the proportions to jive with what you're looking at a little bit easier and a little bit more readily available. Okay, so I think we are ready now. Let's do it. So the one color that I didn't have out was my raw umber, which is the color that I really like to use. You'll notice also that I stained this canvas. That's something that I like to do on anything that I'm going to be working on for any amount of time at all. And especially with a landscape. I mean, this landscape is infused with light, with warmth, with warm colors. So I've used a yellow, straight yellow ochre, diluted with a lot of water, and then just sort of made a big coat of it. I used a bigger brush like this to do that sort of preliminary staining over the whole page. I've done that ahead of time. That's kind of boring to watch paint dry, so I did it ahead of time. So that's something you don't have to do, but I think in this particular instance, it's actually going to pay off pretty good dividends because of the real warm yellow that's kind of prevalent through the whole picture. Okay, so where do we start? What do we do first? With a landscape, I mean, a huge part of a landscape is figuring out the horizon line. And this horizon line is pretty much right along this center lower third horizontal line. So I'm just going to lay that in right off the bat here in very light, a very light wash. And there's not really anything else to worry about in here. It's kind of a nice straight line that I can just sort of generally lay in. And now, again, I'm looking for values. I'm looking for darks and light. That little mountain range on the horizon line, that value is also kind of present in pretty much all of the foliage and general you know, shrubbery over here on the side. So I'm just going to block the area around the water, which has a lot of light around it. So it's kind of, this is kind of a nice frame for things. But still, I like to work, generally speaking, you know, middle to dark or light to dark. I don't like to go for the real strong blacks right off the top, because it's a little bit, it's you know, kind of going for broke. And if you overdo it, acrylics dry really fast, and it's kind of hard to go back and get some of that darker paint to kind of go away later on. I mean, you'd have to go back with some lighter colors. All right, so now let's see here. I'm just going to leave this alone. I'm just, as as I've said, I'm kind of just blocking things in. There's a nice little cloud bank here, which is actually going to be probably one of the lightest of the kind of the middler tones. So I'm just going to lay that in right here. So that's that cloud bank. And like I said, it's just sort of in general broad strokes. And then of course, we've got that big tree, which is probably overall, and that was right. Let me have a look really quick. Go back to my grid. There it is. Okay.
And
So
Mike,
it's
can you
kind of
say one
like,
more time what color we're using?
this one right here is raw umber. It's kind of a nice, really prevalent earth tone. It's not really warm. It's not really cool. It's just sort of a nice middle of the road. Not a lot of color in the traditional sense associated with it. It's made a little extra trunk there. Let's see this. There we go. And then we get the hint of the reflection here. So I'm just gonna lay that in. Almost treating it like like I did last week with like a watercolor. Okay, so the overall scheme, there's a couple little scudding clouds up there. A little one just right up here. And just kind of a nice wash up here. It gets a little bit darker towards the top. Not too dark. And remember this yellow that I've put down, this, the yellow kind of already gets us into kind of a lighter middle tone. So it's not quite white and certainly not black, but it is something more than white. So I'm going to be adding my really strong highlights later on with white paint. So I'm kind of working from the lighter area of the value range to the dark area, and then I'm going to come back to the lights when I do the whites. So that's kind of the way you want to think about it. And one thing to keep in mind as you're doing these is this stage of the painting is a very it's a very kind of loose approximation of where everything goes and how dark or how light it is. You can always come back and make corrections. I like to sort of give myself some options as I'm working. This is a really strange looking tree. It's got a lot of like branches coming off the side of it. Must be one of those weird New Jersey trees that I'm unaware of. All right. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to start making some darker darks here. So I'm going to establish that kind of strong mountain range in the back a little bit more fully. And to do that, all I did was I got some of the brown and just didn't use a lot of water. There's already a lot of water on the page, on the canvas. So it's kind of diluting it a little bit as soon as I put it on there. In a minute, it'll dry out. But it's not going to set up until all that water evaporates out. And as long as that water is there, then I can still kind of get the interaction with the water activated. So just adding a little bit sort of deeper tones, adding a little texture as well, just by kind of, blotting it around. A lot of people, they'll do the sort of the Bob Ross trees, bop, 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 bop. That's fine in small doses. It becomes a little bit predictable if you kind of rely on that for every sense of texture, especially in a landscape. So just mix it up. Just try different things. You'll find you sort of get your own little visual vocabulary as you play around with this stuff enough. So far I've only used the burnt umber or the raw umber. Burnt umber would also work. It's a little bit more red, but it still does the the basic idea.
So we do have someone asking if they can use real brown instead of raw umber.
Real brown, is that a color is that what it says on your tube of paint? I've never heard of a real brown. Real brown is I think a subjective term, but this is when I think of brown, you know, just because I've been painting for a while, raw umber is a pretty good brown. It's sort of right in the middle. It's not too bright. It's not too dark. It's not too cool. But to answer your question, anything that's sort of a more neutral color, like you just don't want to do like a bright red or a bright blue underpainting unless you're, you know, going kind of crazy expressionistic color wise. This is just a good, it doesn't commit too much color wise to your painting. But yeah, any brown sort of in that sienna, umber, Van Dyke brown is another one you'll see around out there. Those are all sort of good choices. I'm curious what the person who asked the real brown question, what does it say on your tube of paint? Does it actually say real brown, or does it just say brown, or what is the title they've given that color? You don't have to answer if you don't.
I'm curious to know what unreal brown looks like.
Yes, right. Or surreal brown. Okay, what else here? Let's maybe darken this a little bit. The good thing about acrylics here in this particular case, the good thing and the bad thing about acrylics is this sort of darker ridge of foliage here has kind of dried up a little bit. And so I'm able to go over it and not, you know, it's not blending with the other areas around it. So I'm kind of layering the darks a little bit. And it's allowing me to sort of create some really nice textures and transitions from one value to the next. So this kind of painting here, with the painting with an underpainting, I sort of alluded to it last week if you were here. This is called indirect painting. And basically what that means is you're not trying to finish it all in one shot. Like I'm purposely preparing this for another layer that I'll be putting on next week. So it is a progressive style of painting. It's not an all or nothing. You just sort of do it all in one shot kind of deal. This is very much step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of painting. And it works great. This sort of acrylic to oil progression is a really good way to do what's called indirect painting. There, look at that. These trees actually come in front of that mountain. I need to make my screen a little bit bigger so I can see it better. There we go. Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. There's cows in there too. I don't know if I'm going to deal with the cows. You can be a selective editor when you're doing, especially when you're doing like a master copy, like we're doing now. It doesn't have to be exact. I mean, we're trying to learn basic, or I'm trying to learn some basic ideas here. I'm not trying to make an exact replica of what George Ennis was up to. I made that edge a little bit. It's not quite right.
So I'm probably gonna not say this name right, but Vevi or Vivi, she said that the real brown is an acrylic paint in a bottle from Folk Art.
Oh, okay.
And I just looked it up, and it looks almost like a medium brown, kind of almost like a football brown.
Yep. So it's kind of more of a pastel brown.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it even has a little bit of white in it because it's probably a little bit lighter tone than this, I'm guessing. So it's not as
so.
dark. Yeah, that would be probably something similar to what's called a maybe a sienna, something like that with a little bit of white in it. Yeah, that would work. That works totally fine. I mean, you can paint with anything there. I mean, there was painters, you know, in the 1950s that were painting with house paint. There's painters now that are still doing that. So, I mean, if you can get what you want out of the materials that you have, more power to you. This is not, you know, you don't have to spend $30 on a tube of paint to get good results. As a matter of fact, it can often be the opposite. If you're a good painter, you can paint with anything. Most anything. Okay, I'm kind of liking that foreground. Maybe this gets a little bit darker back here. Just do a nice little, see, this is why I like these brushes. See, I get a nice, even thin coat across here, but I also can kind of get these more sort of elaborate details. So now I think I'm going to move up into this cloud area. So we're at about, so let's just do this a little bit more. That's probably a little bit dark. Thus, the need for our, here we go. So I'm still watering this down, but it's just a hair darker than what I had before. And you see how it kind of lightens up a little bit in here where that sun is shining through. I'm just going to sort of let that taper off in there. It's not the end of the world if it's not perfect at this stage. But you know, the more you get done at this stage, the less you're going to have to do in subsequent stages. So it just kind of makes your painting down the road a little bit more manageable. And again, your goal here is to really try and manage those values, those lights and darks, highlights and shadows, whatever is most you're most familiar with. But your sense of light and your sense of realism, for lack of a better word, is really going to be something that comes together in a painting if you've got the values right. You know, the colors are great and the colors are really important, but if the values aren't right, it's not going to have that sense of roundness and volume, and in this case, space. So there's a lot at stake in the kind of the value stage and understanding the importance of value. I'm just doing a few extra. That's a bit much. Don't be afraid to finger paint. Okay, what else? We got this one up here. I'll just leave that like so. That'll be fine. Let's see. Maybe it gets a little bit. I'll just sort of add some kind of watery effects in here. It's a little bit darker on these side edges. You can see this sort of this column of light right through the middle where the sun is, and then it's reflected in there in the water. So I'm trying to keep this area open, but over here it gets a little bit darker. And it's also kind of flowy, so I'm kind of adding that. Again, a lot of this is going to be covered up as we progress through it. So if it's not perfect, now you see there that just lifted up a little bit. That's because this was probably not entirely dry. That's something that can happen with acrylics. It can kind of pull up previous layers of paint. It's got to be careful about that. If you see that happening, it's probably a good idea to move somewhere else. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I've gotten the middle tones, dark tone, well, sort of, you know, dark gray tones, and now I want to go into the darkest area. So I'm going to start using black. I'm still going to dilute it a little bit, just a little bit. But I'm really looking for those strongest highlights or deepest shadows, I guess I should say. It's the direct opposite of the strongest highlights, actually. It's like saying I really, really like Brussels sprouts when I clearly do not like Brussels sprouts. All right. There. Should I put in the cows? I'm thinking I'll try the cows. We got 2 weeks to do it. Let's see. Try to be authentic to George Inness's original vision. There we go. And there's some real dark. Yeah, it's lifting up a little bit. Just got to get a little bit more.
Just to confirm for Michelle, is it just we're just doing black and white with brown?
Yeah, well, at this
Today.
stage, I just used raw umber, and now I'm using black, so I haven't even used white yet. But yeah, it's just a value study, so there's no primary colors involved in things yet. So just sort of working my way, just sort of walking my way back to the darks. Are those two little people over there? I think that might be. Here's one person, there's another person. They'll just be little black little slivers there for the time being. I'm gonna have to blow it up if I'm gonna try and do those clouds, maybe or those cows. Let's just do a little. Just playing with a little bit of texture over there. I'll try a little bit more. Going back to the brown here. I want to darken this, but I don't want it to get black. So you can go back and forth. It's not, once you start using black, the brown's out of the question. Nope, it's not the way this works. Kind of go back and forth. Any great painter that you like, that you've seen before, Rembrandt or Raphael, or sort of fill in the blank of whoever you like, George Inness. They all were taught a certain way and then adapted what they knew to the way they liked to paint. So you kind of take that attitude and just sort of run with different things that you see, and I think you'll kind of appreciate the process a little bit more if you give it a little bit of latitude, if you give yourself a little bit of a break, like, oh, I didn't do that exactly right. Well, if it works and you liked it and it was resulted in something positive, then it works for you. So don't feel confined to everything that I do. There are certain things that are fairly consistent, but for the most part, you can kind of tweak your approach.
Do you have a favorite painter?
Do I?
Yeah.
I have a lot of painters that I like. I love Titian, who was an old Renaissance painter in Venice. Rembrandt is wonderful. Gustave Moreau is kind of like this. He's kind of this weird painter. He's a French painter. He actually was a instructor for Henri Matisse, whom many of you probably know or have heard of. And he painted nothing like Matisse. So he was apparently he was a very good teacher in that he sort of let his students kind of go and do their thing, which is always a good sign. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that for sort of the darks and the midtones. Now I'm going to start adding, let me see, is there anything else? Maybe I'll do one more wash over here. There's a little bit of black mixed in with that. That's totally fine. See this over here, this area is not nearly as light as right in here. So I'm going to just kind of set that back in space a little bit. get that out of the light. There's kind of a little halo all around that central light point. That's a bit much, so I can just take some more water here. Blot it out if I feel like I need to. Kind of a cool little cloud texture. Too bad we don't have clouds right there, or those type of clouds anyway. Doing what I'm doing with this it's called working reductively, because you're reducing the amount of paint. That's a great way to sort of stumble upon interesting textural effects and you know, different sort of creation of pattern and things like that. So, you know, play with your materials a little bit and see what happens. Sometimes little sponges can kind of do interesting little things. I'm actually gonna get one of my flatter brushes is here for this. I've sort of been headlong in that round one. Just want to kind of make this a little smoother. This is really a nice brush for kind of unifying an area of color. So for, you know, sort of flat tones, it's a nice kind of losing a little bit of my yellow in there. Try to beef it up. So what I'm dipping into here, I didn't even mention this. This stuff right here is medium. It's this slow drying blending gel medium. It's basically like water in that it's kind of what the paint is soluble in. It'll move it around like water, but it's a little bit firmer. So the paint doesn't sort of bleed all over the place like it can often do with water. So I like to use that when I feel like I need a little bit more body to my paint, but it still will be transparent. I'm just trying to build that little darker tone there. All right, I think I've exhausted this. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in some really strong lights. And honestly, there's not a ton outside of what I've already got with this yellow, but I really want to kind of highlight the, you know, sort of the stronger points. So I'm going to use a little bit of a smaller round brush here and just get a little bit of medium and mix it with the white and maybe throw a little bit of yellow ochre in there just to kind of warm it up. Because like I said, there's kind of a nice glow to things here. So I want to maintain that a little bit. So right above here, maybe a little bit more white. There we go. Just adding, can't really see it on, I'm sort of looking on the screen here. You can't see it all that great on the screen, but it actually, if you're here, if you were here, you would be able to see that it is a touch lighter and has more now of a glow than it did before. So I'm just popping this out. I'm working this white in fairly thinly, at least in the beginning, because I don't want, you know, I don't want it to be too bold and too bright. I may even throw this down in here because it's not, yeah, something like that. Just went into my tree a little bit. It's all right. Now I'm just going to try a pure highlight, just no medium, just white paint, and that's going to be kind of right in here where that sun is. And so when you don't have medium in here and you're just using straight paint, you're getting a lot more texture. Let's see if I can do a little close up here. You're getting a lot more texture by using just paint. It's called sort of an impasto. So you can see I got a big glob of paint on there, and I'm just punching out this really strong highlight. This is something that a lot of artists of the 15th and 16th centuries, 17th centuries used. They changed thicknesses of paint. Like they would have thin passages, and then they would have sort of thinner passages, and it really created this dynamic sense of light. So I'm just really adding a little bit more of a bright highlight here, kind of reiterating it around. And remember, we haven't done color yet. I'm just trying to do value. So I'm really just trying to define subtle transitions between lights and darks. Okay. And generally speaking, this real textural paint, you want to keep to lighter areas. And there's a lot of rationale between or amongst painters as to why that is necessary. But the basic thing is this is generally going to be your strongest highlight. And so when the light comes down and bounces off that, it's bouncing right off the surface. And it's very bright. So that light is shining right, right off the surface. Whereas these darker passages, being a little bit more transparent and thin and layered, they kind of suck the light in because there's multiple layers of paint and it gets trapped in there. So it becomes even darker than if this were just very heavy, dark paint. So it is kind of a tactic that painters will use to kind of brighten up their paintings to the maximum that the materials will allow. I just washed all that white paint out and I still want to use it because I want to take this and put that reflection right in there. So I'm going to do that. We're getting sort of close to the end here. Anybody have any questions as we're moving along? Feel free to ask them.
Is the class for next week going to be oil paints or still acrylics?
Yes, it's going to be oils. So we're going to continue with this painting, but the subsequent layers are going to be oils. And that is actually a really, that's a good way to work, honestly. You sort of do this underpainting in acrylics, which dries really fast. And then the sort of subtle glazing and building up of colors happens with oils, which is really much more suited to glazing. We talked about glazing last week if you were here, and it can be done in acrylics, and I've done it in acrylics. It's just that oils are really the wheelhouse of building a painting like that up. So I'm going to put a little bit sort of light whites over here, thinner whites, just to kind of soften some of this transition up. Maybe hint at a little bit of water coming through there, just sort of, this is called a scumble, when a light color goes over a dark color to kind of do different effects to it. And actually I may do that up top here. So I think I got all the, yeah, it seems pretty good. Getting a sense of light to it now. I'm going to come back and do some more darks in here. But for now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take maybe a little bit of this white and a little bit of the medium and a little bit of the yellow and just try and unify some of this over here. This got a little blotchy, so I'm just going to try and just pull it together a little bit. So kind of bringing it back to the middle a little bit, but still kind of maintaining a warm glow. So just playing around with white, a little bit of the gel medium, and then yellow ochre. But, you could do this. I could take some brown and put a glaze of brown on there just to sort of pull it together if I wanted to. That's probably a little bit too yellow, but let's see how it goes. again, I'm not really concerned with color here. I'm concerned with value, lights and darks. I'll just sort of do a little bit over that as well. Let's do a little bit more here. Not getting this in water if I can avoid it. I get a little bit more control over the tone. It doesn't lift stuff up either. This is just really subtle work here. Yeah, that's a little bit more unified. It was getting a little blotchy. It's a technical painting term. Not really. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Let's put a little bit more in here. That's probably maybe a little bit too much white. No, I don't know. It's kind of pulling it together a little bit. Let's try that. Oh, it's got to catch up with me. We've got a little lag time. Oh, there we go. First of the night. Doesn't take long. There, we're back. And there we go. One of these days I'll get through without it doing that. All right. Okay. Let's see here. And if you look at Innes's original painting, there's actually a lot of modulation up in the sky. If you kind of look at the little thumbnail up in the corner, it's, there's little sort of blue and then sort of a more greenish blue. I'm going to try a little bit of the brown. Ooh, that's a little bit too much. Throw some of this in here. Throw some of this white. Try that. Getting a little sloppy with my mixing here towards the end. All right, let's try now. So up here was it's a little bit darker. But that's good. This is a little bit more gray. But in terms of yeah, that's much better. If you look at Innes's painting, this area of the painting is a little bit cooler. So this is kind of a nice transition tone. So let's just put a lot of that up there. And you find when you got the color, you just kind of, all right. Or in this case, the tone. So that was just sort of a mix of a tiny bit of black, a tiny bit of brown, the raw umber, a little bit of the yellow ochre, and then some white to sort of make this kind of a little bit darker tone that really applies well to that upper sky. It's really kind of pulling things together a little bit up there. Looks a little stormier, but when we get the color in here, it'll make more sense. And this is just not me showing you kind of the idea of an underpainting. This is the way painters of this era probably would have painted. I mean, Innes probably did a very muted underpainting and then started adding the colors over top of it. So it was a really conscious choice on the part of these artists to get those values established first before they went hog wild with color. I mean, it was probably the color was probably a little bit more integrated, but the overall sense of light, I think, comes together better when you concentrate on value in the early stages. All right, I'm going to just do one more little touch up, and then I maybe want to give people a chance to hold their work up and see what you guys have been working on, for those of you that have worked along. Nobody's falling asleep out there, right? Still painting away?
They look busy.
Good. They usually do. Sometimes it's weird. I don't see the screen. I don't see the little thumbnails. It feels like I'm sitting here talking to myself, painting away by
I
my
mean, but
lonesome.
is it different than any other day then?
My neighbors are gonna call social services to make sure I'm not going nuts. All right, what do we got here? Anything else? I'm just doing some last minute kind of touches. Now that all these darks have dried up nicely, I'll maybe try and enrich some of them a little bit.
So Lori is wondering if this can be finished in acrylics instead of oil, if there's any technique or
Yep,
way to
it
do
sure
that.
can. It absolutely can. Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to do it in oils just because that's sort of my comfort zone and what I'm used to. But I mean, I have a lot of friends who do paintings like this exclusively in acrylics, so it certainly can be done. There, getting a little bit darker. I think I'll purposely make this one a little bit darker, and then next week I can show you how to lighten that up. I'll just put a few more of these little dabs. And you see, I've noticed I've towards the end of the demo here, I'm kind of going into a smaller brush because I got just a few little bits left. Well, there's a little one over there. Who else? Okay, I think I'll call this good for now. So this is a pretty good representation. I may add the cows later when I can look at it a little bit more closely. But we'll go with this. I'll pretty much leave it for next week, and then we'll continue on with the oils for next time. So if anybody's got something they want to hold up, I'm game. We got a few minutes left. Oh, okay. Isabella, very nicely done. Yeah, that's got a nice sense of value to it. Of a Freudenthal. Yep. Good. Very nice, Isabella. Yeah, Alfredenthal. Yeah, that looks great. Awesome. Who's on the screen there? That is Beth Worrell. Yeah, that looks great. And Adia, very nice. Yeah, you got the good sense of the values. That's exactly what we're after. Michelle Melvin. Yeah, that looks good. The composition looks great. Throw a few more darks in that foreground and that tree, and I think you are good to go for next week for sure. Patty S. Yeah, that looks awesome. So a few more darks on that horizon line as well, but you've got a really good range overall. Good. Marina. Oh yeah, very nice, Marina. You even got to the lights, you even got to the white, so that's really brightened it up too. Vicki Evans, that looks great. Yeah, that real sense of dark, I think, is pretty prevalent in this one. Yeah, exactly. Colleen, yeah, that looks awesome. That's a really nice range, and the darks are really in that almost black range. Maggie M, same thing. Yeah, good watery little splashes there in the foreground. Sandy, yep. Very cool. Nicely done. Yeah, you guys are not skimping with going for those darks. I mean, you can always make it lighter if it feels like it's getting too dark, but it's harder to get it to go dark. So if you're going to make an error, you're going to err on the side of darkness. That would be sort of my little takeaway from all of this. So yeah, that looks awesome. Great. So we are ready to transition to oils. If you want to come back next week, and work on this, then by all means, feel free to work with acrylics. I am going to be doing the demo in oils next week, and I'm going to be talking about oils. And I'm also going to be, sort of explaining strategies around oils. But if you just want to come and paint and you want to do it in acrylics and just sort of put your headphones on and listen to whatever music you want to listen to, go for it. That's totally fine. But next week it will be in oils. Okay, we are pretty much right at our finish line. Can you show the original once again? Yes. Let me do that really quick. So there's the original, and then there's what we did. And then here is the painting. Georginus Brook at Sunset. Oh yeah, there's 2 cows, 3 cows. Those are trees that I thought were people, and there's a house. I completely missed the house, but maybe I can add that later on.
There's like 5 cows.
There's 5 cows. Wow. I need my glasses. This is pretty bad. Cool. Okay, folks. Thank you so much for showing up and painting along and watching and all of the other interactive stuff that went on today. That was awesome. Appreciate your attention, and we will see you hopefully next week so we can finish this up. Thanks very much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.